I've never been the type of guy who is easily impressed. I've been working as a truck driver for almost 18 years, I've seen everything on the road, a bar fight that turns into a chase on the side of the road, an animal crossing out of nowhere, an overturned car catching fire, but what happened that morning in Ohio still keeps me up at night. It's not the kind of thing you tell anyone without sounding crazy. I'm just writing this here because I found this forum by chance and saw that there are more people who have gone through something similar. I don't know if this will make sense to you, but I need to get this out of my head. It was around 3:30 in the morning. I was driving along US 50, a somewhat deserted road that runs through a rural part of the state. It wasn't my usual route, but I had to make a detour due to a blockage on the interstate. The atmosphere was heavy, you know? Closed sky, without a star, low fog. I could even hear the noise of my tires on the wet road. I was listening to the AM radio just to have some voice keeping me company, when I saw the silhouette of a bridge approaching. I've passed hundreds of bridges, but this one had something strange about it. It was an old structure, with those cracked concrete arches, and it looked like it was darker than the rest of the road. That's when I saw it. On the right side of the bridge, very close to the wall, there was someone standing. It looked like a person, yes, but there was something wrong. The posture was stiff, too static. Like someone who has been there for a long time, standing in the same way, as if they had been placed there. I instinctively slowed down. He was tall, thin, and wearing what looked like a long coat or overcoat. I couldn't see his face, he was on his back, with his head slightly tilted forward, as if he were looking down the bridge. At the time, I thought it was someone about to jump. My heart raced. I turned on the hazard lights, almost stopping the truck, and started leaning on the seat to try to get a better look. But when I got closer, to a point where I should have been able to see the face or at least some more detail, there was no one else. It disappeared. I don't know how to explain. There was no movement, there was no running, there was no sound. It simply wasn't there anymore. I braked, pulled over to the shoulder of the bridge, turned on the high beams and got out of the truck. I walked slowly, my heart almost coming out of my mouth. I went to the exact point where that figure was seconds before and there was absolutely nothing. No footprints on the damp edge. Nothing. And the silence, man, the silence seemed to pressure me. It felt like the night was watching me back. I stood there, staring into space, with a horrible feeling in my chest. It was as if I had interrupted something that was not meant to be seen. I got back to the truck almost stumbling, looking back all the time, as if something was following me or about to appear again. I got in and locked the doors, something I rarely do on the road. I started the engine, but stayed there for a few minutes, with the headlights pointed at the bridge. Waiting for, I don't know, something to happen, or to reappear. But nothing happened. It had just disappeared. And the worst part, the more time passed, the more I began to doubt whether I had even seen anyone there. The rest of the trip to the next checkpoint was a torment. I felt a heaviness in the air inside the cabin, as if I had taken something with me. The road was still empty, but the feeling was that I was no longer alone. And it wasn't a good thing. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I thought I would see someone sitting in the back seat, even though my truck only has 2 seats. I arrived at the gas station with my tank almost empty and went straight to the bathroom to look at myself in the mirror. He was pale, sweating cold. I couldn't even eat anything, I just bought a coffee and went back to the truck with my hands shaking. The weirdest part happened when I went to talk to the gas station attendant, just to see if he had ever heard of anyone jumping from that bridge. He stopped immediately. He asked which bridge, and when I described it, he just shook his head slowly, like someone who had heard it before. He told me that that place was the Bridge of Silence, and that every now and then, drivers said they had seen someone standing there, always in the same place. Always with your back. Always about to jump. But no one ever found any bodies down there. And even stranger, traffic cameras never show anything, even when drivers swear they saw someone. I left there even more confused. It wasn't just me. It had happened to other people, but no one talked about it. As if it were something they preferred to pretend didn't exist. And I understand. Since that morning, I can no longer cross bridges in the same way. Even the little ones give me goosebumps. Sometimes, on very silent nights, I remember the feeling of seeing that figure standing there, motionless, and the emptiness that came right after. A part of me thinks it was real. Another part thinks I saw something I shouldn't have. Something that only appears to those who are alone, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. I came home a few days later and didn't say anything to my wife. I don't even know where I would start. It was the kind of thing you try to bury to avoid looking crazy. But at night, as I tried to sleep, I kept reliving the scene. The way that figure looked like part of the bridge, as if it had been molded there. And the way he disappeared without leaving a trace. It was as if that presence had no body, only intention. A presence made of silence and darkness. I thought about going back there during the day, seeing the place in light, trying to understand, but something in me knew that it didn't work like that. That it only exists when no one else is seeing it. After a while, I started avoiding night trips. Something I had never done before. I, who always preferred to drive at dawn to get on an empty road, started to be terrified of the pitch black. Especially near bridges. Once, months later, I took a route that required me to cross another bridge at night. Unlike the first, this one was new, well lit, full of signage. But still, as I passed it, I looked out of the corner of my eye and I swear to God I saw a shadow standing outside the wall. I didn't turn around to look. I just kept going, with my hand on the steering wheel and my heart pounding my chest. I never saw that figure clearly again, but since that early morning, I have felt that there is something on the road that is not human. Something that only appears to some. Maybe only for those who are alone too much. Maybe only for those who pay too much attention. I don't know if it's an apparition, a warning or something else. All I know is that the feeling never went away. And no matter how much time passes, I remember that moment more clearly than I remember my mother's face. There's something about that kind of silence that marks us. A silence that shouldn't exist, that seems to have been carved with fingertips from reality. And the strangest thing of all is that, after that day, I dreamed about that bridge. I dreamed that I was standing there, outside the wall, looking down. And in the dream, I felt peace. A cold, distant, almost empty peace. As if it were the right place to be. I woke up sweating, with my breathing caught. Since then, I have never gone back that way. Never again. And even so, to this day, when I'm on the road and cross a deserted bridge in the early hours of the morning, I slow down, look to the side and wait. Because a part of me believes that one day, that figure will be there again. And maybe next time, she won't be alone. This happened in Texas in the summer of 2019, and to this day I can't find a reasonable explanation. I've already told this story to a few colleagues on the road, but they always look at me as if I were making it up. Maybe I would also think it was an exaggeration if I had heard it from someone else. But I know what I saw. And more than that, I know what I felt that night. It wasn't just fear, it was a feeling of being invaded, surrounded by something that wasn't part of this world. It was as if the road had opened up to spit out something sick, alive and angry. I was heading towards Lubbock, carrying a load of fertilizer. It was around 10 p.m., and I still had about 2 hours to travel to the next stopping point. The night was stuffy, humid heat, with that smell of wet earth in the air. Everything was normal until then. I was accelerating well, listening to a true crime podcast, when, out of nowhere, I started to notice some dark spots appearing on the horizon, right in front of the headlights. At first I thought it was dust, or even smoke from something burning far away. But as I got closer, I realized that the points were not still. They moved. And they multiplied. Suddenly, these dots began to transform into a dense, black wall. There was no time to break. Everything happened in seconds. The truck drove straight into that living mass, and it was like crashing into a mattress of flesh and wings. The noise was deafening. A mix of high-pitched buzzing and sharp knocks on the windshield. It was a swarm. But it wasn't normal. The bees, man, they were huge. Much bigger than any bee I've ever seen in my life. There was something there the size of a little finger. And there were thousands, maybe millions. When they covered the front window, I completely lost sight of the road. It was just darkness and movement outside. I started screaming to myself inside the cabin. I turned on the windshield wipers, but it was useless. It made a horrible noise, as if I was crushing one animal after another. They didn't go out. Some began to enter through the cracks in the windows, even with everything closed. I don't know how, I swear to God, but they started appearing inside the truck. Some hit my face, others hit my chest, buzzing madly. The feeling was one of absolute panic. Couldn't stop. I couldn't see anything. I could only keep the steering wheel straight and pray that I didn't leave the road or hit something. And the most bizarre thing, I no longer heard the sound of the engine, only the sound of them. The smell was something else absurd. A strong, bittersweet stench that invaded my nose as if something was rotting inside the cabin. I could taste that smell in my throat. I tried turning the air conditioning on full blast, to see if it would keep away those inside, but it only got worse. Some started hitting the buttons on the panel, others stuck to my arms. I started hitting them with my hand, but it was useless. The more I struggled, the more aggressive they seemed to become. And the most absurd thing, I wasn't being stung. They didn't attack directly, it was as if they were there to suffocate, to dominate, to occupy space, like a body fills with worms when it rots. After about 5 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, the swarm began to disperse. First slowly, as if they were being sucked in by something invisible. Little by little the windshield began to clear, revealing the road's outline again. I slowed down, completely drenched in sweat, my arms covered in blood and goo from the ones I crushed. The buzzing became distant, until it disappeared completely. I stopped on the side of the road, shaking. I got out of the truck staggering, my heart pounding. The ground around me was covered in the bodies of bees, as if it had rained there. I tried to understand what had happened. I looked at the sky, at the side of the road, at the truck. Everything seemed normal again, as if nothing had happened. But I still felt them in my body. Not physically, but inside me. As if they had left something stuck to my skin, a remnant of their presence. I stood there for a few minutes, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself that it had been real. And it was. Because when I went to clean the windshield with a cloth, I saw that it was completely scratched, as if thousands of small hooks had scraped the glass from top to bottom. Later, when I arrived at the nearest gas station, I tried to explain to the gas station attendant what happened. He looked at the truck, saw the remains of the insects on the radiator grill and went a little pale. He told me that sometimes, on those most deserted roads, strange swarms appear. Never the same as what I described, but he had already heard about it. Always at night, always with truck drivers alone. Some say it's a natural thing, others say there's something in the nearby plantations, pesticides that cause mutations. But what I saw, it wasn't natural. It wasn't just a swarm. It was as if there was a will there, a conscience. I went back on the road the next day with another truck, because mine needed to be in the workshop to change the windshield and check the ventilation. Mechanics removed dozens of bee carcasses from the air filter, some with their legs still stuck in the grates. One of them took me aside and said he found something strange inside the air conditioning duct. It was like a cocoon, but dark, hard, a little oily. He showed it to me before throwing it away, but just looking at it made me feel strangely sick, as if my body recognized that it shouldn't exist. I didn't want to take it for analysis or anything. I asked him to burn it. I have since changed my shift. I no longer take the road after 8 p.m., even if they pay me extra. It does not give. Sometimes, on a hot day, I can still smell the smell that filled the cabin that night. And every now and then, out of nowhere, I start to hear a low buzzing inside my ear, as if there's something stuck behind my eardrum. I've been to the doctor, I've had tests, they never find anything. They just say it must be stress. But I know it's not. I know you still have something with me, a part of that night that never went away. Something that came in with me and never left. I thought about telling this to the police, or to some environmental agency, but I decided against it. They would laugh in my face or, worse, take the story too seriously and put me on a list of people who see things. I don't want that. I just needed to tell it somewhere. And if you're reading this and you drive these Texas roads at night, pay attention. If the air changes suddenly, if the sky darkens even without clouds, if it starts to look like there's too much dust in the lighthouse, don't continue. Slope. Wait. Do whatever you have to do to avoid coming across that. Because if you get in the middle of that swarm, it's not just the truck that will come out different. And you. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if they were bees, or if it was something else that just looked like bees. But I know what I felt. And it wasn't just fear. It was a feeling that it was wrong in a way that there was no turning back. As if the world had shown a crack, a weak point, through which things that shouldn't be here can pass through. And that night, they passed. And I was there. In the middle of the road, in the middle of them. It's been about 12 years since I stopped driving, after 4 decades on the roads. Nowadays I mostly sit on the balcony, drinking coffee and trying not to think too much about what I saw all this time. But there is a story that still haunts me, especially in the early hours when the silence is too heavy. It's not easy to tell this without sounding like I'm making it up, but the truth is that it happened to me, and it was real enough to make me leave the road a few months later. If you think you've seen it all in this country, it's because you haven't run out of gas in the middle of a dead town in Kansas yet. It was 2009, I think. I was cutting through the Kansas countryside along a route I usually avoided, but the main one had been closed. I should have filled up before leaving Garden City, but I trusted the tank's range too much. It was stupid of me. The truck died in the middle of a secondary state road, with no cell phone signal and no living soul nearby. The sun was already setting, that orange light creeping across the dry plantations. I walked to a small town that appeared about 2 kilometers away. I don't remember the name, if it even had one. I just remember the half-fallen wooden sign and all the houses being closed, as if no one had lived there for decades. The city was small, there must have been 20 buildings at most, but everything was very clean, very tidy. No dust, no leaves, no signs of abandonment, and yet, I had no one. No cars, no kids, nothing. The only thing that really caught my attention was a white church at the end of the main street. It was one of those very old ones, with a small tower and a rusty cross on top. There was a light on inside. I went there thinking I could ask for help, but when I got to the door, I heard strange music coming from inside. It was neither an anthem nor a choir. It was, as if someone was playing a xylophone out of tune, with a meaningless melody. Before entering, I heard a noise behind me, and that's when I saw it. On the other side of the street, between two houses, there was a rabbit. But he was no ordinary rabbit. It was huge. I'm talking about an animal the size of a Labrador, with very red eyes and clean, white fur, without a speck of dirt. He didn't move. He just stood there, looking at me, with that snout slowly shaking. I froze. My body locked up. That didn't make sense. And worse, the silence of the street seemed to swallow all sounds at that moment. Even the sound of the xylophone stopped. As if it had also seen the rabbit. As if everything had stopped just for him to appear. I stared at that rabbit for a good few seconds, unable to understand what was happening. I swear he seemed more aware than an animal should be. It was as if he was expecting something from me. I blinked, and he took 2 slow steps back, disappearing into the shadows of the houses. Then the xylophone started playing again inside the church, as if nothing had happened. But the melody was different now. Still strange, still out of tune, but faster, more agitated. That gave me goosebumps. I should have left there, but something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the fear of being alone on the street, pushed me into the church. The door was unlocked and opened with a long creak, as if it had been waiting for someone. Inside, the church was even weirder. Everything impeccable, clean, polished. But the religious images were covered by black cloths. All. And the main altar had no cross, no saint. Just a dark wooden chair, too big, as if it were made for someone very tall. Next to the chair, an instrument, the xylophone. But there was no one playing. He was alone there, on a table, and the keys continued to move, one by one, as if touched by invisible fingers. It chilled me inside. I took 2 steps back without taking my eye off the instrument. Suddenly, the door behind me slammed on its own. Strong. I almost knocked over a bench when I turned around. I tried to open it again, but it was locked. I was trapped inside, with that sound repeating itself faster and faster, more out of step. The black cloths in the images began to sway slightly, as if there was a draft, but there was no window open. That's when I noticed, there was a sweet smell in the air. Not a candle, not a flower. It was a synthetic, strong, slightly sickening smell. Like melted candy. And I started to hear footsteps coming from the back of the church. Slow, heavy steps that made the floor creak as if someone very large was approaching. I hid behind one of the benches, sweating coldly, my throat dry. The footsteps stopped for a moment, and the xylophone paused briefly before playing a single long, loud note, like a warning. At that time, I saw the rabbit again. But he was inside the church now. Sitting right next to the altar chair, with his ears straight and his red eyes glowing in the dim light. He turned his head slowly, as if looking straight at me, and at that moment I felt that something there had been waiting for me for a long time. As if I had been drawn there. It's as if that rabbit wasn't just an animal, but part of something bigger, more ancient. I don't know how long I was crouched behind that bench, trying to control my breathing. The xylophone played slowly now, like a countdown. And the rabbit remained still. But what scared me most was the sound of the footsteps that returned, heavy, circulating between the benches. I heard wood creaking, and sometimes something scratching the floor. But when I looked through the cracks, I didn't see anyone. Just shadow. A shadow too dense to be that of a man. It dragged like smoke, but it was heavy, it made noise. I closed my eyes tightly and started to pray. I don't even know who, I just wanted to get out of there alive. When I opened my eyes again, everything was silent. The music had stopped, the smell was gone. I got up slowly and the church looked exactly as it had before. The door, this time, opened without difficulty. I ran out. The street was still empty, but there was something different. Now there were streetlights on, something that wasn't there when I arrived. I walked quickly to where the truck was, without looking back. I didn't see the rabbit again, nor did I hear any strange sounds. Just my own breathing trying to get back to normal. When I got to the truck, it started right away. And the fuel gauge, which previously showed dry, now showed half a tank. I left that place as if I was escaping from hell. I didn't stop until I arrived in Amarillo, where I told the gas station attendant the basics and turned off the radio for the rest of the trip. I couldn't sleep that night. And even now, in retirement, every time I hear a noise similar to a xylophone, like a wind chime or a child's toy, my entire body reacts, as if I were still trapped in that church. I tried to find the name of the city on the map again. I returned along the same road months later, and I swear, it doesn't exist. There's not even a trace of that wooden sign. It's as if it has evaporated. And to this day I can't explain what that was. If it was a hallucination, if it was some kind of trap. But I know it was real. And I know that rabbit was waiting for me. As if I already knew that one day I would pass through there, alone, without fuel. As if it had all been put together for me. And the worst thing is that sometimes I think, what if I had sat in that chair? What if I had entered a little earlier? What would have happened to me in there? I don't care. All I know is that I never set foot in any church again. Not even for a wake. There are things that we only believe because we have lived. I always thought I knew the road, the people, the dangers well. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered at a truck stop in rural Missouri. At the time, I was working almost non-stop, working long shifts to pay some accumulated bills. The stop in question was one of the older ones, away from the main road, where older drivers used to go because it was quieter. Too calm, as I discovered later. It was the kind of place where everyone knows each other by name, or at least by nickname, and where new people are always looked at with suspicion. I started stopping there more often because the bathroom was decent and the coffee, although bad, was always hot. There was one guy in particular who was always there. They called him Ray. I don't know if it was his real name, but he was cool. Tall, thin, somewhat stooped, he wore a faded cap and had a dry laugh that sounded choked. He always started a conversation, asked where we were going, talked about road accidents and disappearances. I thought he just liked to talk. Most of us spend days alone, and any interaction becomes a relief. But looking at it now, it was as if he was gathering information. I started to find it strange when, in one of these conversations, he mentioned a girl who disappeared at a gas station almost 300 miles away. He said she had blue eyes and a tattoo on her shoulder. But this information had not been published on TV or websites. I had read about the case on a closed drivers forum, and they didn't even have that many details there. When I asked how he knew, he laughed and said, "We hear some things out there, right?" That gave me goosebumps. Not because of what he said, but because of the way he said it. As if he had seen it up close. As if he was proud. The following week, I was notified by another truck driver that two guys who always stopped at that station hadn't been seen since the weekend. Nobody really knew where they went. One of them had even been seen talking to Ray the night before. And the strangest thing, the truck of one of them was found parked behind the gas station, with the door open and the key still in the ignition. But no one said anything to the police. Not there. The feeling was that everyone knew something, but pretended not to see it. As if there was a pact of silence at that stop. And I started to realize that there was something very wrong in that place. I became obsessed with the idea of finding out what was going on. I started paying attention to everything: when Ray arrived, who he spoke to, how long he stayed. He never slept there. He always said he preferred to sleep while spinning. But one morning, I decided to stay awake in the truck, pretending to doze off. At around 2 a.m., I saw him leave on foot through the back of the station, towards an area of low grass behind the parked trailers. I took a flashlight and followed, silently, keeping my distance. He walked slowly, as if he was used to the path. He disappeared behind a rusty wire fence. When I got close, I saw that there was some kind of old storage room behind, locked with a large padlock. I watched hidden for about 10 minutes until he left. He was sweaty, his hands were dirty, but he was only carrying a small bag, which he threw in the trash in front of the gas station as if it were nothing. The next day, when he left, I returned to the place with a pair of pliers that I kept in the truck. I broke the chain and went inside. What was inside took my breath away. It was like a macabre sanctuary. Photos of missing people stuck to the walls with electrical tape, pieces of clothes folded in plastic boxes, a burned cell phone and a shelf full of jars with small objects, earrings, rings, pendants. On the floor, a dirty mattress and dry dark stains on the concrete. I left there vomiting, not knowing what to do. I got back in the truck and couldn't get out of the driver's seat for hours. I turned on the radio, turned it off. I called again. With every light that came on behind me, I thought it was him coming back. When morning came, I went straight to the nearest police station. I told everything. Every detail. The police officers listened to me with the expression of someone who had heard something similar before, but never with so much evidence. They went back with me to the warehouse and cordoned off the area. They asked me to remain confidential for the time being. They said it could turn into a federal investigation. But I knew that a lot of things there would be hushed up. Too many people should have known and kept quiet for too long. A few days later, I saw on TV that a truck driver had been arrested for illegal possession of a weapon and possession of personal property of missing victims. But they didn't show their name or photo. They only said that he had been investigated for years, and that they were linking him to at least 12 cases. They never talked about the station, nor about the parade. They never mentioned the word serial killer. But those who live on the road, who sleep in isolated cabins and know the shortcuts, know that monsters walk among us. And sometimes, they wear faded caps, tell bad jokes and drink coffee next to you while they choose who will disappear the next night. After that day, I never stopped at that stop again. And, to be honest, I almost don't drive anymore. I finished my pending contracts, handed the truck over to the company and retired for good. I still have nightmares about that shed. With the photos on the walls, with the eyes of people no one else was looking for. And, worse, with the silence of the other truck drivers. That sickening silence that hides bodies. Sometimes I wonder how many drivers have disappeared in this country and were just considered lost or run away. How many simply entered stops like that and never left. I've thought about writing for a magazine or investigative journalism website, but I've never been good with words. And I'm afraid. Real fear that someone will find out that I was the one who told them. Because, even with the guy arrested, the station continues to operate. New people stop there. The name remains on the map, gasoline continues to be sold. As if nothing had happened. And that tells me he wasn't the only one. That maybe there are others. That perhaps that place serves a darker purpose. A collection point, a dead zone disguised as a rest stop. What destroys me inside is remembering the conversations I had with him. The time he offered me a ride across the state when my truck had an electrical problem. I almost accepted. Almost. But something in me, an old instinct, perhaps, made me refuse. And since then, I've been thinking about those who didn't have that same instinct. For those who just wanted to save time or trust a professional colleague. The road has these. It gives you too much time to think, and sometimes thinking too much is worse than not knowing anything. So if you are a truck driver, or if you know someone who makes a living from it, spread this story. Even if you think it's exaggerated. Even if you doubt it. There are places out there that are traps. Stops made to look like shelters, but they are the mouth of the wolf. And there are people who make a living from it. That waits for night to fall, waits for you to be tired, distracted, to erase you from the world. And the worst thing is that, often, no one will miss it. Just another abandoned truck. Just another name that no one will remember. I'm not a man who believes in legends. I've always been more of a practical type, one of those who think everything has a logical explanation, until the night I saw the black dog for the first time. Since then, my head has never been the same. This happened in 2017, when I was still traveling between Nevada and Utah. It was a long, deserted road, with sections so straight that it seemed as if the world ended at the horizon. That night was especially dark, with no moon, and the radio only played static. I had been alone for hours, trying to keep my eyes open, when he first appeared, a big black dog, standing right in the middle of the road. I braked hard. The animal didn't move. I waited for him to run into the bush, but nothing. When I got closer, he calmly walked out of the way, as if he wasn't in any hurry. I looked in the rearview mirror, but he was already gone. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought it might be a lost stray, some animal from the region. But, 3 hours later, I saw a bad accident on the other side of the highway. A completely destroyed car, turned on its side, with rescue personnel trying to get the driver out. The image stayed in my head. But what really gave me goosebumps was hearing another truck driver comment on the radio, "That stretch over there, that's where the dog appears, right?" I was confused by that. At the next station, I struck up a conversation with a man who had worked there for years. When I mentioned the black dog, he turned pale. He said that the oldest people call it the omen of the road. An animal that always appears before tragedies. He said that, since the 1980s, drivers who see the animal end up getting involved in an accident or witnessing something horrible shortly afterwards. Some say it is a spirit, others say it is the devil himself in the form of a dog. I thought it was all very roadside folklore. But deep down, something started to bother me. It was too much of a coincidence. On the next trip, about a week later, I saw the dog again. Almost at the same time, between 3 and 4 a.m., on a different stretch, but with the same scenery, empty road, dark sky, absolute silence. This time, he appeared on the edge of the shoulder, looking straight at my headlights. I could have sworn that his eyes reflected in a strange way, a bit reddish, but it wasn't like the normal eyes of illuminated animals. There was something wrong. He didn't move, he didn't run, he just stared at me as I passed. When I looked in the mirror, he was gone again. And again, a few hours later, I heard about another accident, this time with a tanker truck that exploded a few kilometers away. After the second time, I started to get paranoid. Every time I hit the road in the early hours of the morning, my tension was sky high, my eyes fixed on the road, waiting for him to appear. And when it didn't show up, sometimes it was even worse. Staying in that constant expectation, with sweat running down the back of your neck, your hands sweating on the steering wheel. I started dreaming about the dog. Always in the same place, standing in the middle of the road, looking at me. And, in the dream, the truck braked by itself, and I couldn't get out, I couldn't close my eyes, I just stayed there, looking at it as if I were stuck in limbo. I woke up with my heart racing, and his image stuck in my head. The third time was the worst. I was cutting off a section of I-80, close to the border with Wyoming. It was an extremely quiet morning, without a single vehicle for miles. And it was then that he appeared again, this time right in the middle of the road, in the narrowest part of the mountain. But now, he hasn't left. It didn't deviate. He stayed. I had to detour. I almost threw the truck into the embankment. I barely managed to maintain control, but I knocked over some traffic cones and almost ran over a car stopped on the shoulder. Only later did I discover that there was a worker on the track, outside the cone, without a vest. If I had gone straight, I would have run over him. That's when I started to understand that it wasn't just about accidents that were going to happen. Sometimes, it was as if the dog appeared to prevent something worse. As if he were marking the critical points of the road. A type of sentry. But that only made things more confusing. Because if he was an omen, why would he save me? Or did he choose who continued and who didn't? I told this theory to an old truck driver in Arizona, and he answered me without hesitation, "You're only being spared because you still have things to see. But when he stops showing up, it's because your time has come." That made my blood run cold. Since then, whenever I see him, my chest tightens, but at the same time, I feel relieved. It's a horrible paradox. I've seen him 5 more times. Each time in a different state. Always at dawn. Always in isolated sections. And always, a few hours later, someone dies. A rollover, a run-over, a fire. I've tried to warn on CB radio, but no one takes it seriously. Only the oldest listen in silence. Younger people think it's a story to scare newbies. But I know what I see. And I know what it means. Nowadays, I hardly drive anymore. I only get on the road at dawn when there is no other way. And even so, I avoid certain stretches, certain times. But what really scares me is that it's been almost a year since I last saw the dog. And this absence scares me more than any appearance. I wonder if that's what that old man meant. That his silence is the true sign. That now I'm the one who's marked. Sometimes I wake up at dawn and look out the window, thinking I'll see him standing on the sidewalk, watching me. But there's nothing. Just emptiness. And the silence. I talked to a pastor once. I tried to explain what I saw, without giving too many details. He listened to me carefully and, in the end, told me that perhaps the dog was a kind of messenger. Not bad, but not good either. Just an intermediary. A sign of what the world is trying to ignore. He said that certain places carry too much energy, too many stories, too many deaths, and that sometimes this manifests itself in ways that we can't understand. I left there more confused than I went in, but with one certainty, I'm not the only one. I've met other truck drivers who have seen similar things. Not everyone talks about dogs, but the stories intersect in a strange way. Animals that shouldn't be there. Inexplicable sounds. Sudden memory blackouts. People who swear they swerved into something and then found paw prints on the bumper. It seems the road has its own rituals. And, from time to time, he chooses someone to see what no one else sees. Maybe for punishment. Maybe for protection. Maybe because, after driving for so long, we end up crossing some invisible line. I don't know if I'll see the dog again. Part of me hopes so, just to make sure it's not my time yet. But if he shows up, I'll know. Because there is a type of silence that comes before it. A thick silence, as if the entire world held its breath. When that silence falls again, I'll slow down, turn on the high beams, and wait. Because if it's going to end, let it be face to face with him. At least this way I'll know that the road, somehow, came to say goodbye.